Full disclosure, my wife Marcy went to high school with Barry Polisar. They were friends, and Barry would sometimes play his songs for her. So when we went to Marcy's 25th high school reunion, I was able to put a face to the name. Marcy had made me aware of Barry and his success as a writer and performer. Frankly, I was more than a little jealous of Barry and his success, making his living as a songwriter and performer. I'd been writing songs since high school and had piddling success. So I purposefully didn't really pay much attention to Barry's successes as his career progressed. Boy, what a mistake. Consequently, I wasn't sure what to expect when I went to interview Barry at his home. What I found was a most gracious and talented person who clearly had worked hard and deserved all the success he has achieved. Barry's story was so interesting and had so many twists and turns, I couldn't help but be charmed by the man. Hi, I'm Tim Rose, and this is the Tim Tunes Podcast. This is part 2 of my conversation with Barry Louis Polisar, a renowned singer-songwriter, performer, poet, and author of books for both kids and adults. If you haven't listened to part 1, I strongly suggest that you do so before listening to this episode. In part 1, we introduced Barry and found out about his early years, his origin story, and his career as a songwriter, singer, and performer of children's songs. As we ended the last podcast, Barry had just been censored from performing at most of his usual schools. In this episode, we'll find out what happened and how Barry's career expanded into movies and ads. And we'll hear about some of Barry's prose and poetry. Then finally, we'll hear about what's next. We continued our conversation on the back stoop of Barry's farm in Montgomery County, Maryland. When we last left Barry, he was relating how he had been banned from playing in Anne Arundel County schools, a ban that spread across the country and disrupted Barry's career in its tracks. Let's listen as Barry relates what happens next in the censorship saga.
So now they were attacking humorous songs for kids. So that's why the ACLU got involved. They said, this is a case we can win. And anyway, the school board initially circled the wagons. They didn't want to talk. They didn't want to negotiate. And then I get hired to play the White House.
Beautiful.
George Bush Sr., the Republican.
Loved your songs.
Well, his wife actually was big on literacy and had read some of my poems on her Mrs. Bush's Story Hour radio show. Now, I don't know if it was because of that or they just knew me. I don't know how I got hired, but I got hired to do the White House program. And anyway, eventually...
And you're a lifelong Republican.
Yes, right. No, as a matter of fact, when word got out that I was playing the White House, that also was another round of PR and newspaper articles. Singer banned in Anne Arundel County, but is playing at the White House. And suddenly the White House called and said, you got to not stop doing these interviews with the newspapers and with the radio and with television. And it was really hard because CBS News was set to interview me. And I had to tell them, because they said, look, if you continued when the media calls, if you keep taking these calls, we're going to have to ask you to not perform.
Yeah.
And I knew that would be a death knell if the White House then canceled the show, because so I turned down those last few interviews. But at that point, my attorney was able to get me reinstated in the school, and it was an eye opener, because if I had been a new performing artist,
it would have been it.
It would have been it. I would have been over.
Yeah.
What saved me was all these letters to the editor from parents and teachers who said, he came to my school many times. My kids were raised on his songs. He's funny. He's witty. He teaches things. He's a great educator because he shows that you can use humor in everyday life. All the things that you would expect.
Yeah.
And I remember I did about a month later, I was invited to do a school back in Anne Arundel County, and I was thinking, okay, do I talk about this? Do I mark that this is the first time back? These are kids; they don't know anything about it. But I did do my underwear song.
at underwear, but I do not know why. Underwear is everywhere, but mostly underneath. Usually you can't see what goes on beneath. Now don't use bleach on underwear, that's what my mom will say. 'Cause bleach will eat the fabric and soon it'll wash away. And underwear with lots of holes is a sorry sight. Look around and try to see who's wearing theirs too tight. Underwear is everywhere, but mostly underneath. Usually you can't see what goes on beneath. Thank you.
Underwear is everywhere, but mostly underneath. And the last line of the song is underwear with lots of holes is a sorry sight. Look around and try to see who's wearing theirs too tight.
Yeah.
And when I hit that line, every teacher in the audience stood up and gave me a standing ovation.
Really?
And I was like, whoa, this is incredible. Because they knew this wasn't just a challenge to me. This is a challenge to them as teachers.
Yeah.
And it was really about, not being able to laugh, to wear your underwear too tight, to be a little just constricted. Mostly I'm in elementary schools, and, common sense reigns. And I do the mean teacher song, but I've learned it's not so much doing the song, but putting it in a framework. So before I sing the song, I talk about how I wrote it and what inspired it. And then I tell that story about the teachers who heard about it and said, oh, can you come to my school and sing that song? Mm-hmm. So that lets the teachers have a choice. They can be like the mean teacher, or they can be like the teacher who says, oh, that's a funny song. Can you sing it at my school?
Yeah.
And so even the most, silly, ridiculous song, if it's presented, introduced properly, I haven't had too much hardship in that regard. I'm performing less, mostly because I'm just not as hungry as I used to be. But I've never I don't turn down things. I mean, when they roll in, I just don't actively pursue. Gosh, back in the days, I was doing 200 to 300 shows a year, and that was crazy.
Barry has always been a multi-talented sort of guy. In addition to performing his songs for children, Barry has had many of his songs used in commercials and movies. For instance, recently, one of his songs was used in a Lay's Super Bowl commercial. This next section recounts an event that changed the public perception of his identity as a songwriter, but I'll let him tell you all about that.
My songs get broadcast on radio and television and on podcasts and on YouTube all the time.
Yeah.
I'm at that point, even when I license a song to a commercial, and I do get paid for those. When a company comes and says, I want to license this song, there is a fee for that. But just as important as the fee is, it brings exposure. So All I Want Is You is a perfect example. I recorded that song as an afterthought on my second album. First album had 19 songs. The second album had 17, and I felt I needed at least one more song.
Uh-huh.
And I had this song laying around. It was filler. I threw it on at the last minute. In all the years until Juno, nobody ever asked me for it. I never performed it. It just sat on the album unnoticed for decades. And now I have to sing it at every one of my concerts. But back then, it was a filler song. And how it ended up in the movie was also serendipity, because the director of the film, Jason Reitman, was searching iTunes for a song called You Are the One I Want. Mm-hmm. And in a dyslexic moment, typed in All I Want Is You, and came onto my song and said, what is this? Played it, fell in love with it, called up and said, can I use the song? I said, well, how much how much do I have to pay you?
Yeah.
And he joked, he said, no, we he laughed. He said, no, we pay
We
you.
pay you.
And, that was how that worked. And even that was a little bit of serendipity, because the only reason I was on iTunes was my distributor, CD Baby, was at the time run by Derek Sivers. He was the founder and ran it for years. And when I had recorded those 3 albums, those 3 CDs, I also released my Juggling Babies album and a concert album and one of my older albums. So I was putting 6 albums out at one time on CD. And I called them up and I said, I know I got to register and pay a fee for each one of these albums, but I want to do this whole bulk thing with 6 albums and like 100 and some songs. And his response was, is this really Barry Louis Polisar? I said, yeah. He said, well, oh my God, you're not going to believe this. Before I ever formed this company, I worked as a clown in a circus in New England, and I sang your songs every single day, 3 shows a day, for like 2 years while I was putting myself through college. And I feel like I owe you royalties for all those concerts where I sang your songs. And I said, I don't need it, don't worry. He said, well, I'm gonna waive all the fees to get your albums on CD Baby. But not only do I want these new albums, those original vinyl albums that I used to listen to, I want to have those on CD, and I want to have those in my system too. And because of that, I went back and I put those albums, I had them remastered and put them on CD, and that's what the director of Juno, Jason Reitman, found. In fact, I had re-recorded that song, that rough, off-key, out-of-tune song, and I said, I have a newer version. I'm actually singing on key, and the guitar's in tune. And he listened to it, and he said, no, I like that rough version. That's the one I want. So, it's just the way the world works.
If I was a flower growing wild and free, all I'd want is you to be my sweet honeybee. And if I was a tree growing tall and green, all I'd want is you to shade me and be my leaves. If I was a flower growing wild and free, all I'd want is you to be my sweet honeybee. And if I was a tree growing tall and green, all I'd want is you to shade me and be my leaves. All I want is you, will you be my bride? Take me by the hand and stand by my side. All I want is you, will you stay with me? Hold me in your arms and sway me like the sea. River in the mountains tall, the rumble of your water would be my call. If you were the winter, I know I'd be the snow, just as long as you were with me when the cold winds blow. All I want is you, will you be my bride? Take me by the hand and stand by my side. All I want is you, will you stay with me? Hold me in your arms and sway me like the sea. If you were a wink, I'd be a nod. If you were a seed, well, I'd be a pod. If you were a floor, I'd wanna be the rug. And if you were a kiss, I know I'd be a hug. All I want is you, will you be my bride? Take me by the hand and stand by my side. All I want is you, will you stay with me? Hold me in your arms and sway me like the sea. If you were the wood, I'd be the fire. If you were the love, I'd be the desire. If you were a castle, I'd be your moat. And if you were an ocean, I'd learn to float. All I want is you, will you be my bride? Take me by the hand and stand by my side. All I want is you, will you stay with me? Hold me in your arms and sway me like the sea.
I mean, my songs are not commercial, really, in any sense of it. I mean, it's just my life, right?
Yeah.
It's like my diary.
Right. And actually, I sort of always viewed my stuff that way. I mean, the irony, of course, is, with the song in Juno, All I Want Is You, that sort of brought a new exposure to my songs worldwide that I never had before. So I was always well known in the school circuit, the educators, the librarians. for the longest time, I couldn't get stores to carry my records, my books. I mean, mostly because I was an independent.
Right.
I kept that independent, streak, and whereas it allowed me to do what I wanted and say what I wanted in my songs and my poems and my books, it also wasn't the mainstream big publisher who can get you into every store and get you into Walmart and and Kmart and all the other Marts. But I was satisfied because I had everything I wanted. I wasn't lacking, for anything.
Right.
And then what happened with Juno was it put me in that next sphere.
So did that change your life, or was it?
Well, it didn't change my life because I was already. That was how many years ago? That was 2008.
Yeah.
So I was already established. My kids were
16 years ago.
Yeah. But the one piece in my career that I never had was that sort of international exposure. Now, people still won't necessarily recognize me walking down the street, or maybe even my name. Name recognition is pretty hard, but once they know that, people know that song.
Yeah.
And what that did is it opened up my entire catalog to the world. Mm-hmm. And so since then, that song was used on commercials and on TV shows, and suddenly after they mined that song, they started going to my back catalog, and I mean, I've had close to 40 commercials, international.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, so it sort of shifted more notoriety internationally and in circles that I could never get to.
Yeah.
I always prided myself on being my own label, even though it was a smaller, smaller pie, but I had.
You had the whole pie.
I had it.
Yeah.
And what the Juno film did, the soundtrack, the movie, it kind of exposed me to the world. And not only did the song expose my entire catalog to the world, but then when the song started being used in commercials, that was even more. And like I said, okay, I can get why people wouldn't know my material just from my own label, because I'm a small label doing my own little thing here in Maryland. But the movie brought exposure everywhere. But then the commercials were even more widely known. More widely. Yeah, I've had people say, I never heard that song in the movie, and I never heard it on your albums, but I heard it on, on the commercial,
on the Tide commercial.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, crazy. I mean, but my.
Now, how frequently, roughly, do you perform?
Well, it's a tough question to answer because we just sort of came out of the COVID pandemic.
Right.
And so during the pandemic, I had maybe one or two outside shows. This last year, year and a half, I started up again. Mm-hmm. I probably had 2 dozen, maybe 3 dozen school concerts. And I'm now at this point that I have to make a decision this summer. Clover, come here, girl. For the fall, to if I want to really sort of let people know that I'm available to do library shows and theater shows, and let people know that I'm available for another season of school shows. Every few years I think, oh, okay, this is it. I'm done. I've had a good run. 50 years, that's great. But then I get requests and I take them, and it doesn't feel like work. I mean, work is lining things up and promoting myself and pitching schools, pitching libraries, but the actual concerts I feel like I should be paying them to do. I mean, they are a lot of fun. I mean, especially school shows when you get 500 kids in one assembly, it's a guaranteed audience. Now my school show, my family shows are interesting. I did a show with the local library about maybe 3 weeks back, and it was a much smaller crowd than the schools, which have an entire population. Yeah. But it was like a magical audience because just about every single person that was there either had my albums when they were kids, coming with their own kids or grandkids, My high school English teacher from 1971 came to my show, and I recognized her, and I was able to tell her how her class.
I wonder if Marcy had that teacher.
I talked to her about that. I mentioned
Yeah.
it on Facebook on a message to her about that. But I was able to tell the teacher that her class was literally foundational in my life. It changed my life. She taught Thoreau and Emerson, and Thoreau's essay on civil disobedience was a major influence growing up in D.C. Well, his essay on civil disobedience was influential for me politically in the early 70s, and that effectively influenced my career singing for kids. I mean, there's a reason that my first album was called I Eat Kids and Other Songs for Rebellious Children. And then the other essay was Walden, which has affected everything else that I've done, including my career and where I live.
I didn't find any of Barry's songs that seemed directly inspired by Walden or Thoreau's essay on civil disobedience, but I did find a few things that were obviously inspired by his teachers. Here is one of my favorites.
A is for armpit acne and alchemy, unnatural and alcohol, albatross and atrophy, athlete's foot and anchovy, asthma and autopsy. B is for bombshell bacteria and me. B is for bombshell bacteria and me. C is for cantankerous, canker sore and candy. D is for dumbbell, duty ball and dandy. E is for egghead, enema and earwax. F is for follicle, fatty cell and facts. F is for follicle, fatty cell and facts. G is for grotesque, gross and glockenspiel. H is for hernia, hemorrhoids I hope they heal. I is for imbecile, interface of Illinois. J is for jugular vein, jaundice and joy. J is for jugular vein, jaundice and joy. K is for kickback, karma and killer bee. L is for lint ball, lymph node and larceny. M is for mayonnaise, mayhem and misogynist. N is for nonsense, nudity and nit. N is for nonsense, nudity and nit. O is for oatmeal, Oreos and Oleo. P is for politics, Patton, Edgar Allan Poe. Q is for quadruple and R is for rude. S is for S-hook and T is for two. U is for undulate and V is for villainy. W is too hard and so is X, Y, and Z. A is for armpit, acne and alchemy, unnatural and alcohol, albatross and atrophy, athlete's foot and atrophy, asthma and autopsy. B is for bombshell bacteria and me. C is for...
Wow. So do you have any idea how many songs you have in your...
Well, yes and no. I've written about 150 songs that were recorded, and I'm just talking ones that were actually recorded on an album. And when I was telling you earlier about the Anne Arundel County thing, I started to tell you the story and then we got sidetracked. But the reason I was telling you that story was that when it was over and I got reinstated and I went back into the schools, I then started thinking, well, what was that all about? What was it that made this high school music teacher so aggressive about trying to get me pulled from all the arts lists and of approved performers? And I went back and I said, well, part of the problem was that these albums I made 18 years ago, and humor changes over time.
Right.
Things. If you ever listen to a comedy album from the 70s, that's not funny anymore. Listen to Arlo Guthrie's Alice's Restaurant, the original version. There's a couple things that you would kind of wince at if you heard the original version. Like, did he really say that? Did he use that word?
Yeah.
And not to be politically correct, not to be so overtly, concerned with all that stuff. But I said, I'm working with kids, and kids respond the same way.
Yeah.
But the problem is kids aren't the ones that approve you to go into a school or library or buy an album. And I said, so maybe what I need to do, and my old albums, as I said, were recorded very roughly.
Yeah.
I said, 20 years on now, why don't I just go back and re-record those songs?
Sure.
With a budget.
Yeah.
Add fiddle and mandolin and penny whistle and bass and slide guitar. And so I took my better known songs I realized I had enough for 3 new albums.
Wow.
And I foolishly recorded them all and released them all together. So I put all my animal songs on an album called Old Dogs, New Tricks.
Yeah.
Family songs were in Family Trip. Oh, and what a trip we are. And Teacher's Favorites had my school songs. And those albums won awards, got reviews that my old albums never did. That was in 1993. And I got a chance to rewrite some of the songs. I just had to tinker with a little bit. Change, but some of the songs got a completely revision. And then 4 or 5 years later, 6 years later, my daughter's in college, and she's home for one of the breaks, and she comes across these songs that I've written and recorded, and she says, "Dad, what is with this song? I never heard you sing this song. I never heard." And I said, "Oh, that song has got so many problems, and I don't like the beginning of this one. I don't like the end. I don't like the melody. I think I'm off key on this." And she said, "Wait a minute. You spent your entire career going to schools, talking to kids about writing and the rough draft process and rewriting. Why don't you take your worst songs and see if you can turn them into something new?" And it was like a light bulb that went off over her head, and I ended up rewriting and re-recording 40 songs.
Wow.
It was a double album. I joke I had enough songs for enough bad songs for 2 albums, and the album was called Old Enough to Know Better, the worst of Barry Polisar.
Oh yeah, there you go.
And and some of those songs, I mean, they're completely different songs than what I had originally written, and I had such a great song. So to answer how many songs I've written, if I counted up all of the rewrites and all of the revisions that were drastically different, probably around 200 songs.
Yeah.
This is the story of the ant and the grasshopper. Part 2. What they didn't tell you. You've heard the first part. The grasshopper plays the fiddle and sings while the ants work, storing food for the winter. Then, when it comes time to eat, the ants eat what they had stored while the grasshopper starves. But what they didn't tell you is what happened the next year. There was no grasshopper to play music, so there was no music. Without music, the ants didn't work as hard. In fact, they got bored with working and started to call in sick. Production was down. Those that came to work didn't pay attention to what they were doing. They got sloppy. They stored food in places where other insects ate it up. They were grumpy, ill-mannered. Crime was up. Their lives turned gray and boring. Things began to fall apart. The ant leaders realized that they weren't getting things done like they used to, so they decided to find out why. A bunch of ants got together to see if they could figure out what was wrong. And after careful study, they announced that they needed music to get the other ants to work better. But the grasshopper who played the music was long gone. So a group of ants were appointed to look for someone to play music. Some of the ants didn't like the kind of music the group decided on, so they got together to find someone else to play the music they wanted to hear. Another group was appointed to decide what kind of music should be played. Another group got together to decide when the music should be played. And another group made sure that the music the first groups picked was appropriate for ants. Before they knew it, none of the ants were working because they were all too busy being on committees trying to figure out what music was good and what music was bad. Winter came. They hadn't stored up any food. In fact, they hadn't done anything. And the whole hill of ants went hungry. The moral of the story, boys and girls, is, well, if you can't figure it out, form a committee.
And over COVID, I was doing a song a day.
Wow.
It was 6 months. I took every day. I took one of my songs and talked about what inspired me, where I got my ideas, what were my influences, and then moved from there to doing the cover versions that other people did of that song, and then my own cover versions, my concert versions, my rewritten versions.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean,
And was that an album?
No, that was a Facebook Song of the Day project.
Oh, okay.
And I did copy everything over into a file. If I ever felt motivated enough, I was thinking it would be really nice to kind of have some kind of compendium that talks about that and
I mean, you
offers
could just
choices.
take 3 of them at a time and put them. Are they're all videos, right?
No, those are Facebook. Well, there are videos and audio files. It's a little bit of everything. And
so you could just do. I mean, you could do a podcast.
I
and
could.
Like do 3, and then a few weeks later do 3 more. And
I could. It's
a whole different audience.
It is, and it's sort of like what we were talking about before. I started off writing songs and performing, and then after a fashion, I branched out into writing books and poems, and then in the early 2000s, I guess it was, I had a TV show that I did for a couple years.
Yeah.
And then along came Juno.
Where was that? Where was your TV show?
Well, it was filmed here. Well, it was filmed all across the country, but it was originated in WJLA TV in DC, and then was syndicated nationally for 2 or 3 years, and then internationally through a number of media outlets. And then came Juno, and then came songs on. I mean, Juno was one. There's another movie called 10 Years that had another one of my songs. I've had songs in about 5 or 6 different films and 2-3 dozen commercials. So that was like another manifestation of what I did. And then I wrote a couple books for adults. And then the last thing I did during COVID, in addition to the Song of the Day, I went back to my very earliest roots and took poems that I had written in the 70s that I was just writing for myself. And I said, I wonder if I could do something with these poems. And I basically rewrote a lot of them and put them in syllabic form so that every line of every verse corresponds with the same amount of syllables. And I published a small, slim edition of poems called An Early Picking, which are some of my earliest poems, not for kids. Nobody buys adult poetry. I mean, it's not a market, but it's out there.
Right.
And the other thing is on my website, and I've done this for decades, I have posted everything I've written on my website: books, songs, videos, albums, everything.
Yeah.
Mostly because when I go into schools, a lot of the schools I visit are low-income schools where kids don't have access to buying books, buying albums,
but they have
internet, and so it just opens up the world for what I've written. When I was talking about doing the rewriting process, when my daughter questioned my old songs, one of my failures was a song called Ugly Elvin and the Witch, and it was sort of loosely my answer to Pete Seeger's Abby-Yo-Yo.
Yeah.
When I heard Abby-Yo-Yo, sure you know the song. There's a man and his son, and they're ostracized by everybody in the town. But then the monster comes to destroy the town, and he lures them by playing the flute, and he dispatches the monster, and then he becomes very popular. Well, I thought to myself, that's not the way the world works.
Yeah.
If you're ostracized by everybody in the town, and the monster comes, you're going to have more in common with the monster. I mean, and so I wrote this song, and it wasn't great. It was a meandering, long, 6-minute piece called "Ugly Elvin and the Witch," and about how every Elvin was teased and ridiculed, and then the witch comes, and then he aligns himself with the witch. But I loved the last line, and so here it was. 30 years later, I rewrote the song as the witch, and how the witch is always taunted and teased, and then it's an old woman who's taunted and teased and called a witch, but it turns out she is a witch.
A woman lived alone, not far from a town, in a run-down old house that was fallen to the ground. The children in the neighborhood would taunt her and laugh. They'd tease her all the time, said she never took a bath. They said her house was haunted. They'd scream and yell and jeer. They'd throw things in her yard. They'd point at her and sneer. They They said she was a witch, and they made fun of her clothes. They'd laugh at the warts that were growing on her nose. After years of being taunted, she could finally take no more. She offered each an apple that was poison to the core. She grabbed them by the hair while their poison bellies ached, then threw them in her oven and cooked them into cakes. She put them in her kettle, she bakes them into pie, she puree them, souffle them, muffling their cries. Now there's a lesson or two that I think can be had about what makes some good and makes others bad. If you shut people out or push them away, don't be surprised to find one day that all your friends are gone and you're in a stew, and those that you shut out are devouring you.
And then she seeks her revenge, and the last line of the original that I kept, and I literally rebuilt the whole song on that last line. There's a lesson or two that I think can be had about what makes some good and makes others bad. If you push people out and if you shut people out and push them away, don't be surprised to find one day that and you're in a stew, and those that you've shut out are devouring you.
Yeah.
And so it just worked on so many different levels.
Barry and I then went on to discuss his hits and his love songs.
You got to sing your hits.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it can be a little. You have to find something. You know what I mean? Or you just
I like the.
Sure.
Even All I Want Is You, or the Three-Toed Triple-Eyed Double-Jointed Dinosaur, Don't Put Your Finger Up Your Nose. I mean, those songs are fun, and they're fun to sing. One little tidbit that not a lot of people know, Marcy might know this. When I recorded All I Want Is You, and talk about influences. I know exactly what those influences on that song. Bob Dylan's "You Ain't Going Nowhere," "Ooh, You Ride Me High, Tomorrow's the Day My Bride's Gonna Come."
Yeah.
That was an influence, and also Roger Miller, because Roger Miller has a song called "Reincarnation." If I was a bird and you was a fish, what would we do? I guess we'd wish for reincarnation. And I know that was an influence because I had that song when I was as a kid.
Yeah.
And "All I Want Is You" is bad grammar. Because it should be if I were a flower growing wild and free.
Right.
But I said if I was a flower, because that's the Roger Miller thing that I grew up with. But what people don't realize is when the song on the vinyl album ended, there was like a minute or so of silence as the needle is going around the vinyl, and then a cranky old voice comes on and sings, "If you were the ball, I'd be the chain. If you were the, bread, I'd be the butter. If you were the cow, I'd be a nutter. If you were the, candle, I'd be the wick. And if you were a doctor, I'd be sick." But when it was
in the groove at the end.
In the groove in the end, but when it
wow.
moved onto CD and especially in digital downloads,
Yeah.
they treated that tag as a separate song. And so Jason Reitman, when he was recording, using the song for his movie, he didn't know about it, and I told him so many months later, and he said, "Oh my God, the movie's in the can. If I had known that, I would have thrown that on at the end," because that's so funny. It's like a counterpoint. It's like a counterpoint to my own song.
It's like the opposite.
Yeah. Right.
That's great.
In fact, I remember when a friend of mine in New York, as I said, I forced many of my friends to listen to my songs, my old songs. But I remember when that album came out, I brought it up to New York, and she was listening to it, and the song ended, and she said, "That's such a sweet song, Barry, but it's not like all your other songs. It's really sweet. It's a sweet love song. And then that tag came on, and she cracked up laughing. She said, now I get it. Now I get it. It really is a Barry Polisar song.
This whole song is just the setup.
Yeah, right,
the
exactly.
punchline, right.
For the tag. Yeah. But actually, every album, I put one or two sort of childlike love songs.
Yeah.
Even the first album had a song called Me and You. Mm-hmm. Me and you, singing on the train. Me and you, waiting for the rain. Me and you are the same. Me and you have all the fame we need. Indeed, you and me are we.
Me and you, singing on the train. Me and you, listening to the rain. Me and you, we are the same. Me and you have all the fame we need. Indeed, you and me are we. Singing in the park, me and you like candles in the dark. Me and you, we are the spark. We'll watch that light just make an arc to say, someday there'll be a better way. So small, me and you can stand up tall. Me and you just having a ball. Happy to be you and me.
It's a simple song, and actually that ended up also. That didn't end up on the Juno film, but they put out a extended double CD of the Juno songs, the songs that were on the movie, and then adopted songs that if the movie was 3 hours, he would have used. And, and that song, Me and You, was on that one too.
Oh, at the end of it?
Yeah, not at the end, but on the soundtrack. On the deluxe. The deluxe version of the soundtrack. So those two songs became probably my best-selling songs in terms of downloads, not because of me, but because they were on a major label, distributed, on a top-selling movie. And by the way, the commercials are, I don't ever feel like I had to sell my soul because I didn't have to write a song or change the lyrics for the commercials. They just took my song and put their own visuals, and some of those little 1 and 2 minute video creations are beautiful. I mean, they are creative, they're funny. My first commercial happened way before Juno. I had a song called Water, and
I love that song.
And the water.
It's so nonsensical.
Yeah, so the water and that slide guitar is my friend Ray Telkins on.
Water started long ago. Water started long ago. Water started long ago, and it's still around. Dinosaurs drank water, so did prehistoric men, women and Republicans, Lyndon Johnson and Ho Chi Minh. You think it'd be gone by now? I need water, so do you. It comes with thunder and with dew, from Brighton Beach to Timbuktu, and in my basement now. Water started long ago. Water started long ago. Water started long ago, and it's still around. First you see a lightning flash, pretty soon you hear a splash. Water causes diaper rash. Oh, yo, ho, 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 ho. Water started long ago. Water started long ago. Water started long ago, and it's still around.
some kind of athletic water games on some cable show, sports show, which I never watched or knew, but they did a really beautiful little video clip with animation. And so many, I mean, on the website, if you have a chance, there's a whole section of all the different uses of my songs, and some of them are just moving, emotionally.
And Barry,
emotional
what
pieces.
is that website?
BarryLou.com, BarryLou.com. When I was in college, I had a friend who thought it was funny that I used all three names. Barry Lewis Polisar is my stage name, because Willis Allen Ramsey and Townes Van Zandt and all my favorite singer-songwriters.
All three names, right?
So I did too. And he started calling me Barry Lou for short. Hey, Barry Lou. And so when I did the website, kids would not remember BarryLewisPolisar.com, but they would remember BarryLou.com.
Right.
So that's
I always thought of Desi Lou. You know.
One of my favorite fan letters, somebody said, a little girl said, you should change your name to Barry Lewis. And then people would confuse you with Sherry Lewis and Jerry Lewis. I love that. Now, do you know about the tribute album? Have you had a chance to listen to that?
No.
Oh, okay. So as good as Juno was, before Juno ever came out, a fan from L.A. approached me. He had recorded a couple of my songs on his with his punk band, the Radioactive Chickenheads. They did some videos and they did some audio stuff, and he said he'd like to get together a bunch of bands to do covers of my songs, and his band would be amongst them. And he started the project, and then made a fatal mistake. He said, "Would you?" And this is how long ago it was. He said, "Would you mind putting it on your MySpace page?"
Yeah.
And so I posted that Aaron was doing this album, and he's looking for people to cover my songs. And he was inundated with requests from all over the world. I mean, Greece and England, and I mean, just all over.
That's wonderful.
And he ended up doing a double album called "We're Not Kidding," a tribute to Barry Lewis Polisar. And that's my favorite album, because it's covers of my songs by all these young rock and roll bands, doing my songs in different genres, and I gave them all permission to reinvent and just go wild.
Yeah.
And some of these groups just did covers that sound like, kind of rock and roll covers of my songs, or folk versions or jazz versions.
Yeah.
But a couple of the bands just took the bare bones of my songs and just went wild.
That's great.
And one of my songs, one of the groups is three siblings called Robbins in a Trio, the Robbins family, and they did a version of Never Cook Your Sister in a Frying Pan that, because it was the guy and his two sisters, and it was just incredible. And almost every song on the album is just amazing, and it's really a great honor, and just really touched my soul.
Oh yeah! Never cook your sister in a frying pan, or boil her in water and take her by the hand, and throw her off a cliff or try to make her fall, 'cause these things aren't very nice at all. You might not like her, but don't knock her off her bike. Fighting is normal, but normal ain't right. Don't put her in a bucket and drop her down a well, or put her in the oven and try to sell her to the nice old man who lives down the street. Don't hit her with your hand or kick her with your feet. Never cook your sister in a frying pan, or boil her in water and take her by the hand, and throw her off a cliff or try to make her fall, 'cause these things aren't very nice at all. Don't tie her to a tree and leave her in the woods for the bears and the snakes, and you never should. Lock her in the closet or throw her in the snow, or flush her down the toilet or steal her clothes. If you do these things, then what you do is not becoming to a boy like you. Never cook your sister in a frying pan, or boil her in water and take her by the hand, and throw her off a cliff or try to make her fall, 'cause these things aren't very nice at all. Never cook your sister in a frying pan, or boil her in water and take her by the hand, and throw her off a cliff or try to make her fall, 'cause these things aren't very nice at all. I'm going to cook you in a stew. Yes, sister stew. You better be careful when she's nice and small. Don't beat her with a bat or hit her with a ball. Don't ride up on her dolly, don't steal her teddy bear. Don't hang her by her pigtails or hide her underwear. Don't tie her shoes together, tickle till she wets her pants. Don't put hot sauce on her cereal, fill her bag with ants. Don't put her in a barrel and roll her down the road, 'cause it all goes against the gentleman's code. Besides, you make her up and be bigger too. they turn around and do it all to you. Never cook your sister in a frying pan, or boil her in water and take her by the hand, and throw her off a cliff or try to make her fall, cause these things aren't very nice at all. Never cook your sister in a frying pan, or boil her in water and take her by the hand, and throw her off a cliff or try to make her fall, cause these things aren't very nice at all. Don't cook your sister, you'll make a blister. Don't cook your sister in a frying pan. Don't cook your sister, you'll make a blister. Put that spatula Don't cook your sister in a frying pan. Don't cook your sister, you'll make a blister. I said don't cook your sister in a frying pan. I'll taste that good anyhow. Don't cook your sister, you'll make a blister. Don't cook me Don't cook your sister in a frying pan.
I mean, I've written songs, adult songs, and also songs for kids that I never recorded because I just didn't think they were good enough.
Right.
And I wrote a few songs, especially in the early days. Actually, maybe not even in the early days. I think the songs of the early days were mostly pretty good songs, but later, when I felt like I had to do an album every couple of years, I sometimes, like Ugly Elvin and the Witch, I think if I was being objective, I would have said, no, that song is not ready to be recorded yet.
Yeah.
And there were a handful of songs which when I did the remake, when I did the Old Enough to Know Better, the worst, songs, I actually finally got to go back and rewrite those failures and turn them into something different. And that album, I mean, it's like, I joke that it's kind of like my White Album because every song is a different musical genre.
Yeah.
Mostly thanks to my engineer and buddy Ray.
Right.
But usually when I would write a song, on my first album, I think it was the first album, I wrote a song. I never did like you anyhow. You sing like a fish and you walk like a fish and you sing like a cow or something.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
But I re-recorded it and it became a completely different song.
I never did like you anyhow. You think like a fish and you sing like a cow. You smell like a moose and you talk like a goat. You walk like a frog stuffed deep inside your coat. Oh, you true when you talk and you burp when you eat. Got pimples on your face and blisters on your feet. You waddle like a duck and you snort when you giggle. You run down the street and your middle does a wiggle. Oh, I never did like you anyhow. You think like a fish and you sing like a cow. You smell like a moose and you talk like a goat. Oh, you walk like a frog stuffed deep inside your coat.
Another one, a poem on one of my later albums called First It Bit My Behind.
I saw that one.
So the Georgia Sea Island Singers did a recording called Before My Time or Before This Time, and I used that melody and that sound, and I redid that little two-line poem as like a spiritual. Oh, first it bit my behind and hit it on my...
Yeah.
I mean, oh yeah. I mean, it was really fun to record. I mean, and all those voices were me.
First it bit my behind, nibble on my ear. I'd rather have my hearing more than tooth marks on my rear. Oh yeah, yes indeed. Oh yeah, yes sirree. Oh yeah, you know it's true now. Oh yeah, listen to me. Then it took away my sister while we were all dining. Been about a month now, all clouds have a silver lining. Oh yeah, yes indeed. Oh yeah, yes sirree. Oh yeah, you know it's true now. Oh yeah, listen to me. Oh yeah, yes indeed. Oh yeah, yes sirree. Oh yeah, you know it's true now. Oh yeah, listen to me. First it bit my behind.
Do you have like a standard structure? I mean, you get like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, end, or something like that.
No, I don't really, because I'm not really that well trained and don't read music, and it's all just sort of done organically, whatever feels right. Some songs have choruses and some songs don't. The story songs don't usually, because they sort of tell a story verse by verse.
Right.
Songs like Don't Put Your Finger Up Your Nose, that definitely works with a chorus because it's a kind of a consistent theme.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you want to drive your point home.
Yeah, and I remember one time I was coming back from a concert in Virginia, and I was listening to the radio, and a man was interviewing a kid and said, "Well, what scares you? What are the things that you're frightened of?" And the little boy said, "Well, those voices." He said, "Well, what voices?" "Well, those voices you hear at night." I said, "The voices you hear at night? Like what? What do you mean? Well, can you describe them?" He said, "Yeah, those voices that go thump, thump, thump." And I'm riding in the car and I'm going thump, thump. I was all alone, thump, thump, thump.
Yeah.
Just sitting at home, thump, thump. And that song was born.
I was all alone, sitting at home. It was coming up the stairs. I was really scared. What could it be? Coming after me. Stopped in the kitchen. I was shaking, I was twitching.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
This has
Absolutely.
been wonderful. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Enjoyed it too. Yeah, it does baffle me because, as I said, I went to college to be a teacher. I never expected to do this, and I did it because my ear was tuned to what people were saying. Oh, those are funny songs. And again, I mean, if I had plotted it out, it probably wouldn't have worked. But this was the way things evolved.
That's wonderful.
And that is the advice I would give when people say, "Well, how can I be successful?" First is to do what you like. If you love what you're doing, don't think about it as a moneymaker. Just do it for the fun of it. Because what did Dick Gregory used to say? He said, if it's really worth something, don't worry about spreading it around. People will steal it. But just enjoy it and get your stuff out there. And that's kind of been my attitude ever since.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you so much.
Great, my pleasure.
All right,
Great.
we are done.
I never found out.
Well, that's it for our interview with Barry Louis Polisar. Many thanks to Barry for welcoming me into his home. If this conversation has piqued your interest, please head on out to barrylou.com to find out more about all things Barry Louis Polisar. If you want to hear the little bit of All I Want Is You that was stuck in the groove, just stick around after the outro. This is the last episode of Season 5 of the Tim Tunes podcast. How I got to 11 episodes instead of 10, I'll never know. You may have noticed that it's taking me longer and longer between episodes. That's because I have a new job working as the Director of Lights and Sound for the Chelmsford Center for the Arts in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. Next season, I expect about a 4 to 6 week period between episodes. I'll be taking some time off to release another edition of the rest of Tim Tunes Seasons 3, 4, and 5 so that people can stream my original songs from the podcast that are not available elsewhere. Also, if you're going to be in Eastern Massachusetts on May 24th of 2025, then you should come to the Chelmsford Center for the Arts in Chelmsford, Massachusetts to hear Todd Pronto give us a concert. Todd, as you may remember, was interviewed back in episode 7 of this season. I hope this is the first of many Tim Tunes podcast-inspired concerts and discussions. So please, come on out and support Todd and the podcast. Finally, I'd like to thank my contributing patrons, Larry Green, James Leach, Terry Sullivan, and the late Sally Sislak. Their contributions have made it possible for me to continue producing the podcast. If you'd like to support me and the podcast, you can stream my songs online at whatever music streaming service you use. If you'd like an ad-free version of the podcast, you can find one on patreon.com by becoming a subscriber. If you would like to make a one-time contribution, you can also do so at Rimtoes on Venmo or PayPal. That's Rimtoes, Rimtoes. It's an anagram of Tim Rose. Well, thanks for listening. I'll be back in a few months with an all-new season of the Tim Tunes podcast. Meanwhile, hang in there, baby.
If you were a key, I'd be your chain. If you were a sink, I'd be a drain. If you were a window, I'd be your shutter. And if you were a cow, I'd be your udder. Oh, if you were the chalk, I'd be your dust. And if you were the bread, well, I'd be your crust. If you were a candle, I'd be your wick. And if you were a doctor, I'd be sick.